So the I'm gonna say the thing that I dislike the most about like coaches and the way people think that coaches act and stuff like this, they will just look at the best team. Either at the time it was Fnatic, for example, with Daylor, or us when we went far at Worlds and stuff like this, and they will just point out, yeah, this team is doing so good, so their coaches must be good.
Yep.
It cannot go wrong. Like they're playing good, so their coaches must be good. He's doing good picks and bans for them and stuff like this. But in fact, like Hermit was doing nothing of this. He was pretty much just getting infos from analysts and just giving it to us, and that was the only thing that he did. Like
So he didn't do pick ban. He didn't tell you pick this or this is going to be next.
no, he didn't do anything. He was not bad as a analyst again, but in terms of coach, it's not like he really helped anyone individually. I think maybe some of my teammates can talk about this and stuff like this, but during Worlds or during the season, he pretty much didn't do anything, no.
Okay. So in season 6, who was the guy who you gave, who was the official coach for Origin in season 6? Who was that guy? I forget his name now. It's not good that you don't remember it either. Like, right, well, that says that then. So the guy who's the OG coach, fucking mad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what was the beef between you and him? I forget the detail. Wasn't it like you were just arguing over like whether Europe's better than NA or something?
Yeah, he was just like talking about, because the North American qualifiers were kind of a joke because all the teams had made roster changes, so we had no kind of like stable teams to invite to the actual qualifiers. They ended up inviting like 2 teams that didn't change their roster. They didn't break Valve's kind of roster break rule. Yeah. So Valve had kind of no really choice but to invite them based on the fact that they were more just like teams that didn't change their rosters because everyone had changed their roster. And so like these teams were like total jokes. Like they were totally out of their league in this qualifier. And he made a comment saying like, why is this team here? Like NA qualifiers are so easy. Like this is silly. And I was just like, you can't just like run your mouth all the time. So I just called him out. I had to represent North American Dota. I had to have their back.
Because that's the only part I didn't understand. I thought you were implying that you thought NA Dota was better than Europe, whereas at the time,
no.
so many of the European players were at the top of the scene,
It was hypocritical because he had come over in the past and tried to play in North America with North American players and try to play in all these qualifiers. And he had done it and he didn't really have the kind of success that he wanted to have, and then just kind of left and went back, and he doesn't even like actively play anymore. And for someone to just kind of like open their mouth and talk shit because they're coaching one of the most successful teams at the time is just like total bullshit to me. Like, you're a coach. Like, sure, you have an impact on the game, but like you don't have that big of an impact on the game. Like you don't like automatically, now that you have an entire career of not winning anything, and then you coach a team who wins something, and then all of a sudden you're allowed to like open your mouth and talk shit. Like, that's not how it works.
But obviously, if you think about the modern day, where players have to apologize if they just say something that people don't like, this wouldn't be allowed today, Sadie. Like, it would be very hard to get away with this. Was it psychological warfare? Why were you so like expressive in this manner?
Well, actually, I remember for sure the tournament. Actually, I made apologize to those guys, to MTW, that were my friends, are my friends. Okay. Yeah, when I see Zonic nowadays, I always talk to him. I love that guy. But I was young. I was very emotional player, and my role in the team was to make those guys confident as well. So it was my mistake, yeah. But as you told now, those days we could do such things. If I were a player right now, for sure I didn't make such things, and only some facts, yeah, about some photos and so. But if you heard those phrases on Russian language that I was shouting to my guys, and we all shout. Your ears would die, or died. But it was very funny time. We love to play Counter-Strike. We love to trash talk a lot, but it isn't a good way to attitude, but it was a very good time.
What is your take on these past problems, and do they still, they often come up in discussion, you'll see them in threads. Do they haunt your career to a degree? When people describe, you knew this was going to come up, right? Cheers, mate. So when people describe my past problems as though there's some big scandal that I was involved in, I have never done anything in my career in esports, in my life in esports, so beyond my personal life, that anyone could look at and actually claim on any objective level is morally reprehensible. I've never stolen anything. I've never conned anyone. I have never lied about anyone publicly. I've never had anyone fired or fucked with their job in any way. And yet, when these sorts of incidents are brought up, I'm treated like some villain, like some sinner with a scarlet letter that is forever tattooed upon me and can never be removed and should always be brought up as special context to show what I'm like as a person.
In terms of, I guess we have to talk about me, I guess, a little bit as a person.
Yes.
I'm a very angry person in general. Like, I realized, when I was a teenager and I was really reading Dumas, that I am basically fueled entirely by anger. And there were people like that can go kind of a couple of different ways. Obviously, you can let that anger control you and you can become very small-minded about it. And it's mostly just that when I see things that I think are unjust or aesthetically unpleasing, my first reaction is to start to get really mad. And I have figured out ways to channel that into mostly, sometimes I do go out of line, but mostly productive means, in that I think about why it makes me very frustrated or angry. And then I try and say, okay, well, how can my emotional reaction to this be channeled into something that will improve what is going on around me or in my career or in my personal life? And how can I create something beneficial to myself and other people out of my very hot-headed reaction to something? And so that's why, in the moment, some of my tweets, like, I have very visceral reactions to things, is because that's sort of the impetus to get me to think about why I am frustrated with something, and then think about ways that I would deal with that situation, or I would change that situation in order to make me feel good about it, or at least like not frustrated with it anymore.
One of the storylines that enabled that to happen was this falling out you had with Loco Doco, who, when he'd been in Korea and he'd been a pro player, he'd been a friend of yours, he'd been on our show a number of times. He seemed like someone who was one of your better friends in the industry, and you had this falling out with him, which was kind of public, and there was a lot of sniping backwards and forwards, some of it in fun, but there was always like a little bit of poison behind that, the needles that were stabbed by either side into each other. What did what was that like on your side of things? Because obviously, in theory, things are all resolved now, right?
I haven't seen him since I've been back in LA, but I think Loco Doco, at least, I won't speak to him now because I see less of it, but I think at the time he was somebody who was very, very easily influenced by who he was around and whoever had told him the last thing. So I think that he was sort of weak-willed when it came to his own opinions or thinking objectively about why somebody might be saying something to him. Famously, of course, we had those weird scenarios where he was like flip-flopping between opinions given by his old teammates on MIG at the time. So hopefully, I hope that he, has a more firm grounding in himself. But he was always sort of lost in terms, I think, of his own identity or what he believed in or his relationships to other people.
When you're a competitor, when you're an athlete, I think from a mental perspective, that's more important than anything, right? Being mentally sharp that day, being completely focused. If you're really focused in your opponent, even though they're better than you, maybe they're distracted. If they don't perform at their best, you can still win, right? Wouldn't you agree? And at the very point before the match started, when I found out that they cheated, I was so mentally tilted, and everyone on our team was so stressed out and frustrated and angry that I could honestly say that we went into that match like just already playing from behind, right? If you go into a match and you're just so frustrated and you felt like things were unfair and you felt completely shitty about the situation, then you're just not going to play your best. And when we called them out for being cheaters and nothing happened, we were just so mad because we spent like level ones were. I don't know if you follow the game too much, but level ones back in the day and like a gold lead, right? Yeah, First Blood had like an insane amount, a high percentage winning, right? Like whoever got First Blood had an insane win ratio. So we did most of our prep around First Blood.
Like for people who don't know, back then teams especially would design like trick invades, so you could try and catch someone out, right?
Yeah, they went in our jungle and put 5 wards down. If you go into someone's jungle and put 5 wards down across the map and you knew exactly where they're at, that is such a huge advantage because the initial jungle path. Basically, what Azubu Frost was able to design for themselves was they get this for 7 minutes. If you get the right words in the very beginning of the game, you get to play the first 7 minutes for free because you know where the jungle's going to start. So if you know where the jungle's going to start, you know where he's going to end up. So you can avoid all ganks for like 5 to 6, 7 minutes, and that was such a huge advantage. But I'm not going to even go into it because no one's going to understand.
Sure.
But we were so tilted that we played like shit. But anyways, look, let's be honest here. Azubu Frost was better anyways.
Yes.
But it does not mean that we can't win. What felt really bad was that we went into the match and we were so tilted that we couldn't play our best and lose at our best.
I don't know if anyone's... This is like a weird analogy, but there's a very famous movie called Life is Beautiful, right? And the theme of the movie is it's these people who go to the concentration camps in World War II, but this dad doesn't want his kid to like think it's like, well, how horrible it fucking is. So what he does is he pretends like they're playing a game and everything they have to do, like go in the queue up and say, he's like to something, hey, you're going to go do this. And they make it like seem fun almost, even though obviously that's like the most horrible example. Yeah. But it's kind of like that, right? When you're having to go to the bunker or whatever, you just make it feel like it's just something. Oh, come on, we're gonna get up, kids, and go. Was that kind of the vibe?
Yeah, it was exactly like that. I mean, we were kids. We didn't know what the hell was going on. We understood like it was bombs, it was everything, like it was the war. It was actual war, but we couldn't really like understand the full magnitude of it because we were obviously kids. I still remember my late grandfather. He himself couldn't comprehend the situation that they were bombing us in 1999, right? And then he was like, it was the very first night of the whole thing happening, and we were sitting on a balcony in my house, and it was like you can see the bombs dropping right in the distance, the fire, the explosions, right? You can see it, everything. And I'm looking at him, it's like, yeah, that's not bombs, it's just fireworks, He actually couldn't believe it that was like that was actually happening,
Yeah. Let me ask you about Musa then, because this is someone who was also really old school. I mean, he'd already been in the teams like Game Online that had been to the big American CPL. I've got 2 little stories here to give you a way in, to give me a sense of it, both as a player and as a person. Because as a player, the reason I always told people this guy is the definition of LAN player is because there's a piece of trivia you'll probably remember when I tell you that is utterly insane. Like I even told him, like, even though that's a cool story, mate, that should be like, you shouldn't do it. That should just be in a movie or a comic book. You know that thing where everyone had their config at the time, of course, right? And everyone had all the settings. Remember, people bringing rulers to it. He famously, right, he thought that was like, no, that's just some like whack shit, like why is everyone messing with that? He used to just put exec config.exe or default, the default config. And if you don't know, that automatically makes your mouse sensitivity 3, right? And I tried explaining to him, but you do know though, miss, like that'll be different on each PC though. Like what about the mouse drivers? And he just goes like, I'll figure it out. And essentially, as far as I know, he would exec that, use all the default binds, whatever sense this PC was set to. And his logic was, I'll just warm up for like 10 minutes and then I'll get the kills. He just didn't see the game as like something you had to do. And that's a real story, by the way. That's not a joke, guys. He was doing this at like CPLs
else, as far as I know. And then the other thing is, just to give you a sense of who he is as a person, because obviously a lot of Finns, people think of like the really quiet guys who were scared to speak English and stuff. Put it this way, not only was he like a shit talker back then, Natu, he's one of the few people who every now and then, in the last 10 years, when I'm doing all these events, would just like send me a Facebook DM and be like, yeah, tell all these fucking scrubs what it's all about. Like, oh, these pussies didn't hire for the event or whatever. I'm like, and also I want to, basically, even then he still had that same persona. So give me some thoughts on this guy. What are your favorite people, right?
Yeah, one of my favorite teammates of all time. We still talk as well. I haven't seen him in a couple of years, I think, but typically I do. Like he comes by to like the assembly events just to kind of meet up and we'll have lunch. I mean, a really good player for sure at the time. And that just quick side note on the config stuff. Actually, one of the reasons I think actually why the Finnish players were so good on online versus LAN was because they were friggin' wizards when it comes to setting up your config. And we, because of WCG 2001 and the CPLs, because we used to only, like, we practiced against NIP before the CPL. They won the winter 2001, and we went to the WCG. That's when we got introduced to the CPL config, which was like basically the most default thing you could have. You had like, basically it was a rubbish config because you were playing with like worse network settings than you should have been playing. So you were at a disadvantage and sort of, but then once you got used to it, and especially when you got to LAN, you got a massive buff because everyone was on that config, right? So I think that's one of the reasons. But yeah, back to Musa. I mean, I think more so, I just remember one of the unique features. When I went to their house where he used to live with his parents, I just remember the first thing I saw when I went to his room was a hole in the wall. I was like, no, you had a tough time there, buddy. So, yeah, had a bit of a tougher game the other night. But yeah, no, he was a hilarious guy. He could come up with the most random jokes, the perfect joke in any given situation. A great teammate. I think his only like kind of issue sometimes was that he was a bit too temperamental, so he would rage a bit too much in situations and not focus on the ball, or eye on the ball when it should have been the thing. But I think overall, for sure, like one of my all-time favorite teammates to play with.
Everyone needs a support network, and mine is, of course, my Patreon community, the Scrominati, who, in many ways, they're the Sonny to my Cher, saying, I got you, babe. So this video and all the others on my channel were kindly supported by the following names: Ahmed Hadjou, Mac Pugnatio Rajcula, Adam Tomlin, Animosity, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Jerky's Minion, my main man, always going to be referenced, one of the best patrons of all time. Would you like to ask a question in my AMA? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest to say on my channel. Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming Reflections and Talk to Thorin interviews are. Maybe you want to do one of those long discussions where you get to set the topics we talk about. Well, if any of these or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Scluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.